Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is something a little bit different. We're going to be making a project bag. So this is what we're going to be making. So I thought I'd put together a little tutorial to make these fabulous little bags. Now I use these for knitting projects. I'm knitting socks at the minute and shawls, that kind of thing. Obviously sewing is my first love, but when it does get to autumn and winter I do love to do a little bit of knitting, and I found this fabulous tutorial from a lovely lady called Sam, who has a website, a blog called Betsy Makes, and she has a tutorial on there for this project bag. So I have to credit Sam for this. I made it following the tutorial, but I thought that you might be interested in having a little video tutorial so that you can see how these are made. And the beauty about these bags is that they stand up on their own, they're fully lined, and they're a really decent size to put your little knitting projects in, or gift bags, etc, etc. So if you're interested to see how you make one of these, then please stay tuned and let's get started. So you're going to need a few bits and pieces to make this project bag. The first thing you're going to need is your fabric. You'll need an outer fabric and a lining fabric. You're going to need some fusible fleece, a quilting ruler or a measuring tape. You're also going to need some cutting tools. You're going to need a minimum of a 12-inch zip and either a rotary cutter and mat or some fabric scissors to cut your fabric out. Now your outer fabric, you're going to need a minimum of 20 inches by 13 inches. So what I'm doing here is I'm measuring on the wrong side of the fabric, 20 inches by 13 inches, and I'm going to cut that out. So once you've cut that out, then we're just going to give that a little press, and that's the outer piece of fabric ready. Next we're going to turn our attention to the contrast lining fabric. So this piece needs to be 20 inches by 19.5 inches. So that's what I'm doing here, just marking the fabric, and then I'm going to cut that out. Next we're going to cut out the fusible fleece. This is Vilene and it comes in two weights, a 650 and I think it's a 750. You want the lighter weight fleece because you don't want it too thick. The measurements for this are the same as the inner fabric, so it needs to be 13 inches by 19.5 inches. So that's what I'm doing now. Next we're going to attach the fusible fleece to the outer fabric using an iron. You need to follow the instructions with the fleece that you've bought because they're all slightly different. Next we're going to fold the lining fabric in half, and we're going to measure 2¼ inches across by 2 inches down on the folded edge of the fabric, and we're going to cut those corner pieces out. Now when you've cut them out, don't throw them away because we're going to use those later as casings for the zip. So we're going to do the exact same thing on the outer fused fabric. We're going to cut the corners off just like we did the lining fabric, but we don't need to keep those corners. We just need to keep the corners for the lining fabric. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to prepare the zip. You need a minimum of a 12-inch zip for this. Longer is fine. You just need a normal zip, normal plastic zip, not a concealed one or a metal one or anything like that, just a normal zipper. And the corners of the lining fabric that you've cut out, you need to keep that. So the corner that you cut out, what we're going to do is cut this straight down the middle. So if you fold it in half and cut it in half so that you end up with two pieces like that, okay? And then what we're going to do is on the one end of the zip, we're going to sandwich the end of the zip between the two pieces of fabric like that. We're going to stitch along here so that it will open out like that. Okay, so we're going to do that now. Okay, so I've made my mark, which is 12 inches exactly from this end of the zip here where we've enclosed the other end. So what we need to do now is we need to make another mark, which is going to be 1 centimetre outside of that mark that you've just made at the 12-inch mark. So I'm going to do another line, which is going to be 1 centimetre to the side of it, just there. So if I use, I don't know if you can see this very well, if I use my tape measure there, then I'm going to make another mark, which is just going to be there. Okay. So this is going to be our stitching line. So what you need to do next is you move your zipper pull towards the centre of the zip. Really important to do that, otherwise you're not going to be able to fasten your zip. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to place the other 2 pieces of the corner of the lining fabric that you removed. We're going to butt them up to that second line that you've made. So right sides together, enclosing the zip. And then we're going to stitch at that 1 centimetre seam allowance just here that we've just made, and then the zip will be at exactly the right length that we need. So we'll do that now. Okay, so we've stitched at that 1 centimetre mark, and then when we fold that back over, that will now be at 12 inches. So we've got both ends of the zip encased in that fabric. So that's what it should look like. What I've done is I've just cut the tabs down, and then your zip now will be 12-inch long and the ends are encased in the tabs. Okay, so next we're going to make a little tab to insert at the side of your bag. Now if you've got something like a little name tag or a little logo or something like that, you can use that instead. But basically all I've done is I've cut another section of the remnants of my lining fabric, and I've made this 2 inches by 4 inches long. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it over at the across the long edge. So the long edge is going to be the bit that we're going to sew. I'm going to sew with a very small seam allowance there, and then I'm going to turn this the right way around. So we'll do that now. So once we've sewn that tab together, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to neaten this edge with my pinking shears so that as I turn it, it won't fray, and it just cuts down the seam allowance a little bit as well. So once I've done that, I then use one of these devices, which is a loop turner, and basically it's got a little hook at the end with another little hook on it just there, if I can show you that. And essentially all we do is insert it into the end of the tab and then hook that over, and then we just gently wiggle it to pull it through, and it should pull through the right way. There we go. So we just manipulate that the right way, and then we're going to give that a press, and then we've got a tab made that when we fold it over like that, we can insert into the side of the bag, and we've got a little tab. So I'm going to go give that a press now. So next it's time to attach the zip. You want to attach the zip to your outer fabric, and they need to be right sides together. So you want it with the zip pull facing down, and we're just going to pin this in place central to the outer fabric. So we're going to pin the zip facing down to the outside of the outer fleeced fabric. So I'm just pinning that in place, and then we're going to go stitch that all across there. So once that's stitched in place, we're next going to put the lining face down over the top and then stitch over the stitching line that we've just done. So I'm now pinning the lining in place exactly over the stitching line that we've just stitched the zip to the outer fabric. So I'm just pinning that in place,
and then we're going to take that to the sewing machine and stitch over the exact same sewing line that we've just done. So here I am showing you that stitching line. Now we're going to turn it round and we're going to do the exact same thing but with the other side of the outer fabric. So we're going to bring the unstitched other side of the zip over and pin it to the outer fabric, the other edge of the outer fabric. So I'm just pinning that together now. Note that I've just kept the zip open here. You must make sure that your zip is open, otherwise you won't be able to turn the bag round once it's all stitched together. So just pinning that in place, and then we'll take it across to the sewing machine and stitch that line just across there. So once that other side of the zip is stitched onto the outer fabric, we're going to bring the other edge of the lining fabric face down onto that same stitching line as we did before. So I'm just pinning that in place now on exactly the same stitching line that we've just stitched. Raw edges together all the way along, and then we're going to take that to the sewing machine and then we're going to stitch that in place right across there. So once that's stitched, you should end up with something that looks a bit like this. So there's the stitching line, and we've got the lining and the outer fabric, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stitch the seams together. Now before we do that, I'm just showing you the outer seams there that we're going to be stitching together shortly. Before we do that though, we're just going to mark the fold points of what's going to form the box pleats at the bottom of the bag. So I'm just making a little mark on each of the corners there. So this is on the inside of the outer of what's going to be the outer of the bag, and I'm going to do exactly the same on what's going to be the inside of the lining. So I've just made those marks there. So before we stitch up the side seam, we need to make sure that we're going to insert the tab if you're going to attach one. So here's the tab that we prepared earlier. Just going to fold that in half, and then I'm going to insert it so that the raw edges all line up into what will be the outer bag, and I'm just going to pin that in place there. So starting at the centre, I'm going to match up the zip, and then we're going to pin that in place and pin the lining and the outer fabric together along the seam edge there, and then we'll take that across to the sewing machine and get that side seam sewn up. Then we're going to do exactly the same thing on the other side of the bag along the other seam. So once your side seams are sewn up, it should look something like this. Next, we're going to form the box pleats at the corner of the bag. Now this is where you want to match up those marks you made on the fold lines of the bottom of the lining with the seam that you've just sewn. So here I am showing you how I open up the seam and match it with that little mark that we made on the fold line at the bottom of the bag, and I'm just going to pin those seams together. We're going to repeat this on one corner of the lining fabric and both corners of the outer fabric, but we're going to be leaving one corner of the lining fabric unstitched, and the reason for that is because if we stitch it up we won't be able to turn the bag the right way around. So we want to leave one corner of the lining fabric open so that we can turn it the right way around.
So I just wanted to show you a bit more of a close-up as to how you get these lovely box pleat corners. So once you've sewn the side seam up, what you do is remember the mark that we made on the fold line of the bottom of the bag earlier. We're going to match the side seam up with that line. So if we just open up the seam allowance of the side seam, and we're literally just going to join those two edges together just like that, pin it together, there we go, and then pin all the way across the bottom of your bag. Now we do this on the outer fabric, which is the fused bit, So we do that on both corners of the outer fabric and only one corner of the lining. So we leave one corner open because if you stitch all four, you won't be able to turn it out, and we're going to need to turn the bag out through that hole. So I'm going to stitch those now, and then we're ready for turning the bag out, and this is when the magic happens.
So once you've stitched three of your four corners and you've left the one corner unstitched, what we're going to do then is we're going to use the unstitched corner to turn the bag the right way around. So being careful here, because you don't want to be tearing your fabric, you should be able to pull the entire bag through that little hole. Might take a little bit of manipulating depending on the type of fabric that you use. Obviously if you're using a thicker fabric such as a canvas type fabric, it might take a little bit longer and a little bit more fiddly. I've used quilting cotton here and it's fairly straightforward. So what you want to do is turn it all the way around, making sure that you push out those lovely box pleat corners that you've just made, and yeah, there you go, showing you how I make sure that the lining and the outer fabric, all those corners are nicely pushed into place to make them as sharp as you possibly can. You can also take it across here to your ironing board and give it a bit of a press if you want to. And yeah, that's about it. So once you've turned it the right way round, you should be able to see that it's all beautifully lined with no visible stitching. You've got your little tab at the side there, and your project bag is almost complete. The last thing that we need to be doing is closing up that little hole in the corner of the bag that you use to turn the bag the right way around. There's a couple of ways that you can do this. You can simply just fold the raw edges in and slip stitch it by hand, or if you want to be really quick like I'm doing, you can just fold it in, pin it in place, and then take it to the sewing machine and just stitch over that seam there. I'm quite happy to do that because this is just for me. Obviously if you're making these for gifts, you might want to take a little bit more time and hand stitch it so that it's a blind hem, but for my own benefit, I'm just going to do this on my sewing machine. So I'm simply just folding that seam together with the raw edges tucked inside, pinning it in place, and then we'll take it to the sewing machine and sew across that seam.
So there you have it, there's your finished project bag, and you've got the little tab on the side just there, and then if we open up the zip you can see that inside it's all beautifully lined, and yeah, perfect for putting your little knitting projects in, or you could use them as gift bags for Christmas. It's great for using fat quarters. You've got the lovely little box pleat at the bottom, and it's just a fabulous tutorial. You could bling it up, you can put some little, I don't know, some sequins on there, or make some little floral flowers out of scraps of fabric, that kind of thing. So they're just great, they're absolutely great, and I love them so much. And the beauty about these as well is because they've got the fusible fleece attached inside, then they stand up on their own, so they're absolutely perfect. So yeah, have a go. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. Let me know what you think. And yeah, I think it's a really good pattern, perfect size. You could play about with the sizes, you could do some colour blocking, so I'm planning to make some two-tone ones as well and mess about with the pattern a little bit. So yeah, really love this pattern. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that anyway, and I'll see you all again really soon. Bye bye.